Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of Rainer on Leadership, a podcast for leaders of church. I don't know what to start with because we had that other
it's
one.
New. It's new.
It is new.
Well, it's new to you. This podcast has been around a long time. Started with my dad, and now we have a couple of co-hosts, yourself included. So Jonathan Howe used to be the voice of Rainer on. Yeah, Jonathan's doing great. Certainly still a friend, and we wish him well. But he used to say, "Welcome to Rainer on Leadership, your online home for leadership lessons and advice for the local church." But you don't have to, Josh. You don't have to say that. You can just say
gotta be myself.
whatever you want.
Well, for today, we've gone past it, but I'll come up with something for next week or the weeks after there. I am excited to be on Rainer on Leadership. I think it's a great podcast, had a long, successful legacy, and something that we want to continue to service the church and help those who lead the church.
Yeah, and we certainly want to thank our sponsor, Southern Seminary, also known as the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I went there. I grew up on that campus. My dad was a dean there. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that they would be sponsoring a podcast that I'm on. But I love what they do, and this is just the institution. I love everything about the institution that is Southern. Very, very grateful for their impact on my life. And they've got a new fully online PhD program. So if you're interested in that, you should check it out. sbts.edu/Rainer is where to go. It's not just recorded lectures. You're going to have live interactions with the same professors who teach on the Louisville campus. By the way, that's how you know if you're a local or not. It's not Louisville.
Right.
It's certainly not Louisville. Louisville. That's how you say it.
Right.
So if you're new to Southern and you're really interested in this, which you should be, just so you know, when you give them a call and be like, "Hey, I'm hearing that there are great things coming out of Louisville," then they know, he said it right, she said it right, Louisville. Anyway, they've got all sorts of seminars included in this fully online PhD, including Old Testament exposition, historical theology, biblical theology, ethics, leadership, discipleship. They pretty much cover it all. So join that long line of ministry faithfulness that dates all the way back to 1892, when the seminary launched its first seminary-based doctoral degree. Actually started in North Carolina, then moved to Louisville later. There's a whole history behind that, fascinating history, actually. But that's for a later episode. We can talk about the history of Southern Seminary. For now, what you need to do is to go to sbts.edu/Rainer. That link is in the show notes as well. Go check out their fully online PhD program.
Yeah. I am actually in Louisville, not Louisville.
Louisville.
I'm in Louisville, Texas. So
you are Louisville, yes.
That's right.
With the W. Yours has a W in it.
It does.
First
Yeah.
Baptist Church, Louisville. This is Louisville, which is in Kentucky. You are in Texas.
That's right. Mine's
So
Texan,
difficult.
and that's French. So difficult topic. Let's jump.
Difficult topic today. It's necessary. By the way, full disclosure, this is in my book, Make My Church Safe. So I am citing my own self as it's talking about online PhD programs. If you're listening to this, you're not watching on YouTube. I'm showing my book. I have a copy of my book, Make My Church Safe. And I did learn in the PhD program that there is such a thing as self-plagiarism. So you can't take something you've done in the past and repackage it for a paper. Not that I ever did that, but we did learn that self-plagiarism is a thing. So a bit of admitted self-plagiarism with this podcast episode, because some of this material is in my book, and we expand it greatly in my book. So anyway, I'll just do an ad spot for myself. I keep holding this book up by my head, just so you can take it in. Which, by the way, Tyndale did a great job on the cover. Make My Church Safe is the name of the book. We also have an accompanying resource that's a digital resource to help train your church. It's called Safe Church Training, and you can go to makemychurchsafe.com to check it out. So let's dig into this.
Yeah.
We hear this all the time. And let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. The vast majority of pastors are not abusive. And just because your pastor may be firm or pointed or convicted, that doesn't mean your pastor is abusive. But there are abusive pastors out there.
Yeah.
And you and I, as pastors ourselves, want to talk about this. So hopefully we can have some discernment as to, is my pastor just in a bad mood, which is certainly possible, or is my pastor abusive? Those are completely different things.
Yeah, I appreciate you making that distinction. I think we live in a world that is so geared or oriented towards the oppressed and the oppressor, and we love to put ourselves in the category of a victim, when in a lot of times, any of us that have led in any organization know that leadership takes some sort of conviction, it takes some sort of decision making, and while we could all get better at collaboration and getting buy-in, also just the reality that leadership has changed. And so several years ago, an authoritarian sort of leader was effective. Even if they were kind and gentle, that authoritarian stance was effective. Today, it's just not. So we want to be very careful as we talk about this, that just because someone is, I don't know, applying the rules differently in different aspects, there may be a number of variables that they are considering, and it's just not as simple as we want to make it. And oftentimes people who are being led and don't like the leadership direction will accuse a leader of being manipulative or abusive or a narcissist or something like that. And that's not what we're saying. We're talking about purely evil-intended or very broken leaders that are acting out of a place of hurt and not out of a place of God's grace and the good of the church. So that's where we're kind of sitting there.
Classic leadership studies question. So this is, you get into Leadership 101. It's your first class, and the professor pulls out, I would have chalk because I actually still have a blackboard. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see my blackboard behind me.
I got a marker board right beside me.
Yeah, so probably a marker board now, or whiteboard, whatever you call it.
Yep.
Pulls out a marker and writes on the board, was Hitler a leader? It's this great, leadership question. And it's a bit cliche now, but anytime you bring Hitler into something, it's just like automatically disqualifying, because these politicians can be like, oh, they're just like Hitler. I'm like, yeah, I don't think they may be bad, but they're not that bad. Come on now. But it is a classic, pick your tyrant. Now, I make the argument that Hitler was not a leader. I make the argument that leadership is taking people to a better place. And if you're not taking people to a better place, even if you have power over them, tyranny is different than leadership. That's my argument. I don't know if you have a different perspective, but when we're talking about abusive pastors, we're talking about people who aren't leading. They're not taking their congregation to better places. They're harming their congregation. They're hurting their congregation. Or if not the entirety of the congregation, specific people within the congregation. And there's been enough scandals out there to know that this is a thing. I think abuse is a systemic problem in leadership circles, specifically the church. And it is something that needs to be addressed, which is why we're talking about it today. So I want to dig into this a little bit. By the way, was Hitler a leader? What do you say? Yes or no? I'm curious.
I would probably start at arguing yes. I don't think a leader needs to take to a good place. I think a leader just takes from point A to point B. I think the debate I often hear is he a good leader? Like, was he effective? And then you're going to have to split hairs between good being effective or good being morally just. Obviously, very evil person, did a lot of horrible things. But that's not to say we couldn't learn from his leadership style. And so I don't know. I think as you were saying that, there's a number of questions within leadership and church leadership that I think would make fun episodes of just ask that question and let's argue it out, because there's ways to talk about those. But you have a number of things here through this list, and you've included them in your book. If those who are listening want to flesh this out more and study it at a deeper level, I would encourage Make My Church Safe by Sam Rainer as a book for you to read with your church staff. The first one that you mentioned, Sam, is entitlement. Now, isn't this just something that all of us Americans have? We're all entitled. I deserve what I've got. What makes entitlement dangerous and toxic in leadership?
Yeah, great distinction. We all have our moments. We're sinful people. Everything that we're about to list, everyone does. So are we all abusive? No. What's the distinction? It's a pattern of behavior. Have I ever acted entitled with my family, my wife, my church? Have I ever had a sense of entitlement in a committee meeting? Of course I have. But is that central to me? I don't think so. But it's kind of like the person that says, I'm a very humble person. They're probably not. So it's like, I'm not a very entitled person. That maybe I am. I don't know. But it is something that I try to root out of my children. My children will not whine, and they will not have a sense of entitlement. Those are like everything else is secondary to me when it comes to parenting. But I think the thing here is using each of these things that we're about to address, including entitlement, as tools to further yourself on a regular basis. So this isn't, wow, they're off today. That's out of character. If you're saying things like that about somebody, they're probably not abusive, even if in that moment they were really bad. If you're like, man, that was just, that's not like them at all. Okay, something may be going on, and it may need disciplinary action if it's a pastor. Like, you may have to deal with it, but the pattern is more important. And so we're also not talking about physical abuse. You do physical abuse once, you are abusive. So let's just be clear about that too. If you're a husband and you hit your wife one time, in my view, that's abuse. Like, there's no reason to do that. So with some of these, this is a bit more subtle, and I readily admit that there are some things that are very clear cut: sexual abuse, hurting minors, physical abuse. This is more on the pattern of leadership, or not leadership side of things. So, what's the pattern here? So I just also want to make that distinction. I mean, some people are going to say, well, I know an abusive pastor. This pastor did X, Y, Z. And I'd say, well, yeah, that's always abuse. Even if it's done once, that's abuse. Having a sense of entitlement one time is not abuse, but it can be if it is coupled with some other things and it's regular. And I'll also say that a lot of times people who are abusive in leadership are also very charming. So it's like, this, it's hard to notice sometimes. You get sucked into it. People who have charisma, who have that's different, not from a leadership perspective, not from a theological perspective, but charismatic leadership is very powerful. And sometimes the most abusive people can also be the most liked. And, that's a challenge. Yeah. Sometimes if you have a likable personality, you can use that likable personality to be entitled, and people don't notice it as much. I tend not to be all that likable, honestly. I think if you talk to most of the people around me, they'd say Sam's a decent leader, but yeah, it's not like he's got all this charisma. So I think if I were to go down this road, I'd be called out pretty quickly. But some people can get away with it. So that's the first thing I would say, is entitlement. And entitlement is basically, I deserve your attention.
Yeah, and I think that's
you would never say it like that, but I deserve your attention.
Yeah, I think it's important that you put deserve instead of because as leaders, especially as church leaders, we have their attention, and we have to shoulder that. And so you have to realize that your words are going to carry more. So you're going to have attention. I think there's also some other things when we think of entitlement. Sometimes people will be like, things like there's a restroom built onto my office here, and somebody could see that.
I am so jealous.
Yeah, some people could see that and say,
I have to poop with the commoners.
Yeah, he's so entitled. Or some churches have a pastor's parking space and those kind of things. I think some of it's cultural. Some of it, I couldn't care less if I have a bathroom attached or not. It's fine by me.
I'll trade you.
Now, that I have it, I like it. But I'm not going to sit here and demand it. And I've seen pastors that are like, I need the biggest office. Well, why do you need the biggest office? Well, because I'm the pastor. Well, that may be a sense of entitlement there. So it's a difference between deserve, because reality is none of us deserve anything. And so we deserve hell and damnation. We don't get that. So what we do instead is we just shoulder some of these things. So we have entitlement, which does often lead to the next one, which is superiority. And especially in arguments or leadership, the quote that we have that kind of defines that is, I am always right. What the pastor says goes. Flesh that out more. Because isn't the pastor the one that's going to make the say? How do you draw a distinction between that?
Yeah, so a lot of times the lead pastor is going to have the most authority in the church. Sometimes it's informal power. Other times it's formal power, depending on your governance. But regardless, if you're preaching every week or most weeks, you are likely the person who has, at a minimum, the most informal power. So superiority fleshes itself out. It's not that you make a call. It's not that you get to make a call. You're the leader. Leaders should be making most of the calls, frankly, regardless of whatever governance structure you have. And if you're one of those that's like, we have 14 elders that make all of the decisions equally together in our church. I'm just gonna call hogwash on that and say that I've never seen that in practice. I've seen it on paper. I've never seen it in practice. Usually there is somebody in that room that is the one that's the deciding factor that makes the call. So it's not that you make a call. It's that you, one, can't admit when you're wrong, because if you're making a lot of calls, guess what? You're going to be wrong from time to time. So it's the person who can't stand in front of others and say, yeah, hey guys, we did a lot right here, but this one I got wrong. And here's how we're going to fix that, and here's how we're going to go forward. Not that, stand in front of the entire church, that's a whole other thing, but at least in front of your committee, your deacons, your elders, whoever it is, and say, yeah, we got about 80% on this one. Let's address the 20%. That's not superiority at all. That's somebody who's actually owning the part that didn't go well.
Yeah.
But I would say the person who always has to be right and can never admit they're wrong, that's a warning sign. And it could just be a personality flaw. Doesn't necessarily mean they're abusive. But if you couple entitlement with superiority, and along with a couple other things we're about to discuss, I deserve your attention and I'm always right, we're headed down a road of danger, in my view.
Yeah, any one of these is human. Any two of these is a problem. Any three or more, or two or more without working on it is abusive. So the next one is duplicity, and this is specifically talking about the way we enforce rules. I think there's two ways to go with this, Sam. The idea of I do not need to follow the rules. There's also this idea of this group doesn't need to follow the rules. This is my special little group, and that's often used as an authoritative sort of, I don't know, there's a group of people, maybe it's the pastor's family, that just kind of has this rough shot over the staff or over the body, and that's duplicitous. And it's not helpful at the very least, but it's also abusive. One of the examples that I would give, and this is going to be super debatable, but we were just talking about it.
This means it's good.
We were talking about it here recently. At the time of this recording, we have not yet turned over the new year, and there are some church leaders, some pastors who are like, "Look, I need somebody here on New Year's Eve." Where they're going to sit here in this office just in case. You know why, Sam? Just in case what happens? Somebody drops off their end of year giving. They're going to drop off that one check just out of the blue, that kind of thing.
Or they bring a truckload of gold bars, and if somebody's not here, we're not going to get them.
We're not going to get it. Even though there's a lockbox that's got 3-inch steel around it and bricks around that.
You can't fit gold bars in a lockbox.
Well, I'm telling you, if somebody's going to do that, just give me a call, and I'll meet you up here. But I always find those types of rules to be duplicitous because the one making them would never even dream of being the one who's sitting up here all day long and not doing anything. And so that's probably debatable because there is a certain level to your chief executive officer doesn't do some things, and I get that. I'm saying it's debatable. But at the same time, there just needs to be a heart that says, what's good for you is good for me as well. We're all going to live by these rules.
Yeah, I think the thing to look for here is accountability measures. So if the staff has to follow certain accountability measures and the lead pastor doesn't, that is a major warning sign. So I do not need to follow the rules. It's one thing if the lead pastor has a little more flexibility on, let's say, an office schedule, if you require an office schedule, because there's just certain things that a lead pastor has to do. Like, okay, some give there, some grace there. But if it's like, hey, the staff have these accountability measures and I don't, that's a major, major issue. So that's where I would go, is where do you really see duplicity? It's with people who will hold others accountable to certain things, but they themselves are not held accountable to them.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest signs of abuse is the pushback on accountability. So entitlement, I deserve your attention. Superiority, I'm always right. Duplicity, I do not need to follow the rules. Justification, my anger is warranted. Now, this one we have to be careful on because there are times when anger is warranted. There's times actually to get in somebody's face. There's times to be angry in the pulpit. There's times to be angry in a staff meeting. Again, this is a pattern where every time you're angry, every time you have an outburst, well, I was justified in that. Some kid missed a line in the children's production, and you go chew the parents out. Well, I was right for that because they missed that line. It's like, no, that's not a reason to be angry.
Yeah.
So I would say justification for ongoing anger is certainly another warning sign, particularly if you put it together with some of these other pieces here.
Yeah, anger is like any other emotion. It really is more of a warning light on the dashboard and not so much the problem with the vehicle. It tells you that there's something going on. And so if that anger if you have a very short fuse, if you're getting mad constantly over just, we have an obsession in church world and church work with perfection. We pretend it's excellence, and we say, excellence is honoring to God, but it's actually perfection. And we get really mad if things are not perfect, and yet we're leading an organization of volunteers and it's people. So there's that, but also where you direct that anger. It is one thing to be angry at a situation. We have a real problem around here with people not showing up on time, or we have a real issue with a lack of volunteerism. And I've warned, I've taught, I've exampled, but now I'm angry. That's one thing. But I'm mad at you, and I'm angry with you. Well, there's just a large part of shepherding sheep in which sheep act like sheep. Sheep bite. So you're just going to have to kind of encourage them along and use that anger in a productive manner. So there's just very little justification for being angry toward a person. It's like I recently preached on James where it would be, slow to anger. And there is a time for righteous anger. Just be very slow to pick up that mantle. There's time, but just don't be so quick, and a lot of us are very quick at that. The last one I think is very easy to see post-trauma, and that's manipulations. The quote you have there is, your question attacks me, but the common phrase now, the popular way to say that is that gaslighting sort of situation, but manipulation.
This is gaslighting.
Yeah, it's extremely abusive. When you're manipulating people, in the name of God, that's a bad deal.
Yeah, so this is something very simple. Like, somebody comes to you, they have a concern. Maybe it's justified, maybe it's not, and they just express a question or a concern, and you all automatically take that as an attack, or somebody. Obviously, you're not abusive. I said you, second person. No,
right.
This is others, right? It's always others. So I would say that when you see that happen, though, when it's flipped back on you, like, hey, I just had a question. Well, you're attacking me. No, I just genuinely want to know something. Well, this is uncalled for. I can't believe you think this about me. I can't believe you'd have such a low opinion of me. Those are real big warning signs. So you take all of that together. Entitlement, I deserve your attention. Superiority, I'm always right. Duplicity, I don't need to follow the rules. Justification, my anger is warranted. And the manipulation, hey, your questions are attacking me. You see that regularly in somebody, all of those, it's almost guaranteed that person's abusive. So again, most pastors, your pastor's probably awesome, frankly, and really genuinely cares about you. But I do think that this is something that is important for us to discuss because there are abusive pastors out there. I would say that this abuse has become somewhat systemic in churches because there's just a lack of accountability structures in churches, generally speaking. And let me tell you, pastoring a church is hard, and there are many times when you're going to struggle with each of these, but it's the pattern, it's the combination of them and the regular pattern of them that we're really looking for. So
yeah, very much.
That's about all the time we have for today. Tough subject. We've got a more fun subject next week. So it won't always be this down, but hey, it's an important topic. And we have an important group to tell you about. It's called Church Teams. Yeah. So Church Teams is one of the, if not the best, church management software systems providers that's out there. And, they take that service side of software as a service really seriously. It's good. Their stuff is good. Like, it's just solid, all the way around. But where I think Church Teams really shines is with their service, with their team, and they can help your church. So whatever systems needs you have, whether it's guest follow-up, whether it's online giving, whether it's text communication with your church, all of their systems are integrated, which is great. Especially for a church that doesn't have the time to deal with multiple different options on these things. They're all easy to use. So the interface, in fact, they got a new interface that they've recently done. Super easy to use. And their reporting systems are good. So go to go.churchteams.com. Again, go.churchteams.com. And give them a call. Reach out to Boyd Pelly. Tell him that we sent you. He'd love to hear that. And Boyd is actually going to be on the show here soon. A few episodes coming up. Bring him back on the show to talk about technology. He's got such an amazing breadth of knowledge in this area. So reach out to them. Go.churchteams.com. Again, the link is in the show notes.
Yes, and thank you so much for listening to Rainer on Leadership. Do us a favor and share the show with other people and let them know that this is a good resource to you, because we would love to help others as well. Thanks again, and we will catch you next week.